All right, boys, let's jump back in. I know I have to get ready for work, but I want to take this time and try to finish reading this chapter. A personal story. I remember on one occasion I was traveling and staying the night in an upscale hotel. I had a very busy and successful day in ministry, but when I found myself alone in my room, I noticed the movie advertisements on the top of the television set. It was clear that adult fare was readily available with the push of a button. Frankly, I was tempted. The very titles were designed to stimulate a man's sexual appetite. At that moment, I picked up the phone and dialed my wife. I shared with her how I was feeling. "Why am I so tempted?" I asked. I'll never forget Elaine's response. "It's easy to understand," she responded with a sympathetic tone in her voice. "You're a man." We then prayed together and asked God to for strength, not to yield to this kind of temptation. I remember falling asleep that night reading my Bible, realizing how fortunate I was to have a wife I could talk to, a woman who wasn't threatened and who encouraged me in those times of temptation. Step 2: avoid sexually stimulating situations. Men should not set up conflict situations by deliberately exposing themselves to temptation. Several of the men in my initial study group also traveled extensively, and it was their consensus that airport newsstands featured Playboy, Penthouse, Hustler, and a variety of other men's magazines are not conducive to moral purity. Neither are video stores. Most of these places of business specialize in pornography of one set or another. Furthermore, many hotels are now equipped with in-house movies that feature sexually explicit scenes. Soft porn plays hardball. Some Christian men rationalize what they watch on TV or the internet, or what they see in magazines, by avoiding X-rated viewing and limiting their activities to less explicit movies, or what is identified as soft pornography. However, Dr. Judith Reisman has written a powerful book entitled Soft Porn Plays Hardball that demonstrates the effects this kind of sexual stimulus has on the millions of men who view this adult fare. In her book, Dr. Reisman demonstrates why allegedly innocent girly magazines have done more harm to children, women, men, and the family than has entire illegal entertainment. Reisman identifies the idea of soft porn, which have filtered into advertising, TV, art, music, novels, and sex education in schools. She documents how pornography bears an enormous responsibility for the spiraling rate of divorce, venereal diseases, and abortion, as well as new and deadly forms of sex crimes against women and children. The havoc wreaked on our country and is, it's a new word to me. Oh, inestimable. Wow, new word. And the family is the prime target. Sadly, Christian men have become addicted to this kind of pornography, which often leads them into more explicit kinds of viewing. And sadder still, the Christian family is not exempt from the damage this inflicts on wives and children. Pursue righteousness. A very important principle emerges from this study of Scripture. In the in the provocative society in which we live, and no matter what our spiritual maturity, we must guard against deliberately exposing ourselves to literature, movies, TV shows, and internet and activities of any kind that are designed to illegitimately excite and stimulate our sexual natures. Step 3. Think right. Men should fortify themselves through regular study of the Word of God and prayer. Nothing dulls the desire for communication with God and the study of His Word as much as indiscriminate exposure to illegitimate sexual stimuli. And nothing is so effective in combating temptation and lust as an effective prayer life and Bible study program. Thus, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things." Philippians 4 and 8. That's a good one. What Paul wrote to the Philippians is great criteria by which all of us can evaluate what we read, see, and think. Do what we're doing pass this very specific biblical test? Does what we're doing pass this very specific biblical text? Step 4, be accountable. Every Christian man should have at least one other Christian man as an accountability partner. Having an accountability partner or partners has become more and more necessary in the culture in which we live. We must remember, however, that this in itself is no guarantee that there will be true openness and honesty. For example, a pastor I knew well met with another pastor every week. However, he was not honest in his communication. In fact, he circumvented the tough questions we needed to ask one another by simply saying, "We're mature men, let's just talk." Unfortunately, he was having an affair and avoided real accountability. He eventually divorced his wife, married the other woman, and left the ministry. Dang, that's whack. Step 5, seek professional counseling. Men should seek help from a competent Christian counselor if moral problems persist. This is particularly important and absolutely essential if a man has a sexual addiction. In these situations, a man needs someone other than his wife to help him overcome his problem. No matter how mature or our marital marital partner's addictions are threatening to any woman. Addictions are threatening to any woman. Perhaps as a single man, you are fighting a losing battle with lust. Of all people, you need an understanding friend and helper, a prayer partner, a listener, an advisor. Never share your problems with a single girl or a married woman. That can be lethal. You need a mature man of God who can help you work through your problems. Points of action. The following projects are designed to help maintain a life of moral purity. If married, ask your wife to read this chapter on her own. State that your purpose is to form a common basis for discussion. Next, discuss the chapter with your wife using the following questions as guidelines. How do you as a woman differ from me as a man, especially in our sexual feelings, needs, and attitudes? 2. How do I as a man differ from you as a woman, especially in my sexual feelings, needs, and attitudes? 3. What can each of us do in our attitudes and behaviors to better meet each other's needs sexually? If single, list 3 of the greatest problems you face that are related to your sexual nature. Study these problems carefully, and then honestly answer the following questions. What am I doing to accentuate these problems? What can I do on my own to solve these problems? Can I solve all of these problems alone, or do I need help from a competent counselor? If either married or single, pray and ask the Lord to help you find another Christian man who will be your accountability partner, thinking and growing together. The following questions are designed for a group discussion after reading and studying the content of this chapter. Why does Paul, in both his letters to Timothy and Titus, list moral purity, the husband of one wife, immediately following above reproach? See 1 Timothy 3 and 2 and Titus 1 and 6. I imagine because in many situations you find yourself, you're exposed to people's stories, their situations, their personal challenges that speak to some moral issues or some concerns that can lead to temptation. That's my initial thought. What do you think? What are some specific things we can do to maintain moral purity? What has worked in each of our lives? What hasn't worked? I know I tried to just keep myself like entertained, whether watching the movies or doing something else. When I'm away, I always have tried to call, like I'll call home. And like if there's a situation where someone is like flirting with me or talking to me, suggestively, I would just try to reach out and I talk to my friends, and I let them know, like, someone's been hitting on me or someone's trying to talk to me, and like I make that clear. And I try to avoid like situations like if I'm alone by myself, then a movie where there's suggestive stuff is more tempting than if I'm surrounded by you all, by family. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like loneliness in general, I think can fuel some of those desires. So by doing stuff to feel less lonely, I think it helps to fight against some of those urges and desires. What are some things we can do to begin communicating with our wives? How can we be honest with our wives without our wives feeling threatened? I'm not sure. Like, in trying to just name stuff, I think that's what I've done. I just try to name what's happening. Or like when I was in Boston, when somebody was like propositioning me or trying to flirt with me, I would just name it, and I think it gives it less strength when it's stated. That way, it doesn't feel like something that I'm just holding in myself, like my own personal secret. It doesn't feel like an option or an opportunity because I've named it. So that person, it's almost like a spotlight or an exposure comes available in doing that. And at least I've seen it. I mean, it hasn't really happened. I feel like then there's the opportunity to be asked questions, like asked, like, all right, why is this person seem tempting versus a random person, or or you know, like your mother, she could ask. I don't think she ever has, but she could ask, like, all right, has that person ever talked to you again? Has that person tried something again? But knowing that that's an option, I think is something that is helpful. So I just try to name some stuff. And I've tried to make sure that I focus my attention and desire towards my wife and my marriage. So flirtation or anything, if there's anything that I do, it would be towards my wife. It wouldn't be towards anyone else. And I think that's stuff that helps me. Why do men have more difficulty in maintaining moral purity? I somewhat disagree. I think there's a lot of women who struggle with moral purity. I think it's kind of one of those things that it's kind of just assumed that men we're just more explicit with what we do and who we are. But I think it's just a sin problem that we all face. But I think for men, we have this like testosterone in us that like the idea of like I don't know what term I want to use that sounds clean, but there's like a desire in us, like like a longing in us where it's like this insatiable hunger. I don't know, just a desire within us. And I think physical connection is more significant to us. Like physical closeness is often more more an aspect of connection for men. Almost like, oh, okay, we care, we love. Physical expressions of that seem to be more significant for us. Flowers and flirtation are maybe they're nice, but they don't seem to hold the same weight in our eyes and in our hearts. But I don't know. How can we avoid sexual addiction? If this is already a problem, how can we overcome it? I think sexual addiction is something that can approach subtly and then take up a stronghold. I know when I was a teenager, my desire was to remain a virgin until marriage. And it was only through talking to older men who kind of like encouraged me in a negative way. And they were men from the church. So it was kind of difficult for me because it was like, oh man, you got to do this, this, and this. Man, you're your father's son. I know you got this going on. And it was stupid, but like in a way, I know I wanted to do these things, but I was also listening to people telling me I should do these things. And then the people that I was, who I was talking to at the time, they were all people that I felt closely to. And in my mind, my thought process was, well, my desire is for marriage. So it just made it feel okay. And that was something that kind of drew me towards like allowing like sexual things to be just a part of my life. And it is addictive. And I could see why sexual purity is so important. I could see, like now I see why waiting for marriage is so important. Because if you can give all of your attention, emotionally, physically, sexually, to one woman, I think that's like the greatest gift, because there's nothing else to draw your thoughts away or distract or nothing. Like your desire for one person can just be so much stronger simply by having that be your focus and where your attention goes. But I think there's a lot of stuff in this world that seeks to keep us disconnected from our own what benefits us. And the enemy hates marriage. The enemy hates that bond and connection between God, man, and woman. So the world is full of distractions, and it, like I said, it's subtle. like I have to keep very cautious because like I'll go on any social media, like, and I'll say, have to go into something and say uninterested, not interested, not interested, because it always gears towards like women in some sexual way, and I have to put uninterested, uninterested, and no matter how many times I do that, like stuff will keep coming up, and it's all because there's like, it's just a big push to show and expose certain things. um, I don't know, maybe I need to turn my stuff on kid mode or something. I don't know, but even that probably has some explicit stuff in it. That's the same as, like, for my age, I get hair loss, hair loss, and testosterone booster pill advertisements constantly. Like the algorithm knows my age and my gender, so it just pushes certain stuff. And in real life, the everyday life, I try to be cautious about what I look at, because like there's a lot of beautiful women around me in the situations I find myself in. And it's easy to sit there and look at someone and notice they're attractive. So I try to be attentive to not look again. Like if I sit there and see someone and I notice and then I look away, sometimes there'll be that urge to look again, and I recognize that that is a different kind of look. If I was to look again, I'm looking specifically to see them as, for the attraction. So I have to be very cautious, and I watch myself to try to avoid that. But I said a lot. Let me know if y'all think something on any of those, and set a goal. Write out one goal you'd like to achieve as a result of this study. All right. Well, that'll be an interesting one. I wonder what kinds of things might come up with to set as a goal. I know as one goal, um, find something else to be like mindful of in my time, especially now, like in this apartment, because it's so much quiet time, so much time where I'm by myself and alone. And naturally, my thought is to reach out to call you guys, or to call your mother and just check in. I'm also trying to be respectful of the desire for space, which then leaves me sitting here like, all right, so what do I do? Wanting to put something on the TV, or do something to kind of like let the clock run down on the day. And that can be dangerous with no move or motivation towards something else to do, something else going on. So yeah, I guess I have to find something else to do and something else to have going on to be productive with my time. And maybe this is a part of it, the reading of Proverbs, and the reading of this book to share with you all. I think it's an aspect of wanting to make sure that I'm not just here in the silence to be tempted by whatever is to come, you know? Um, but I do know temptation is always there. It's always present. And throughout my whole life, I haven't always been able to fight against it. I've fallen and failed many times. So in my heart and in my desire, I try to seek God, and I really do try to seek God. I try to pray, and if I ever fall to temptation to where I'm like looking at something inappropriately or inappropriate, or desiring after someone that is not my wife, like I repent, I pray, and I talk to God and ask for forgiveness, and yeah, talk to my friends and let them know, like, I'm struggling, and just go from there. But hey, man, I love y'all. I love y'all. Love y'all. I hope that we can talk soon. I hope just reading this can be helpful, even if it's not helpful in this moment. Then maybe it'll be helpful somewhere down the line. Maybe there's a better way to share this stuff where we can communicate and talk through it. But I was just hoping, because I know y'all are busy, maybe this will be a good thing. So, love y'all. Hope you have a great day. Bye.